and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast of swiftly wilting euphoria with me, Yorgos Panagiotidis, and a swing in a world of roundabouts.
Ben Maddox. The room hasn't shrunk, Georgios. It's just that my esteem for you has grown. Therefore, there's less space.
Okay. Is it a Tommy Wiseau reference?
No, I don't know who Tommy Rizzo is. Is he the man who makes the cigarette papers?
Possibly. He must do something.
Yeah, I assume there's a...
He made a movie, at least. One of the famously awful movies.
Oh, is that the Room guy?
Yeah.
I've only seen clips.
It's so much worse than the clip suggests.
But the point is, I'm one of these people who can't really get behind ironic enjoyment of things.
There's nothing ironic about it. It's basically watching a car crash and just, you can't stop watching. Your body sort of convulses and sort of goes into fits, but your eyes, can't stop watching but you can't imagine how it can get any worse. And then it does.
And did you, this is for the lady listeners in the audience.
The lady listener.
Like the one you met on the train the other day, Georgios.
Yes, apparently.
When you were watching it, did its disgusting badness give you a little bono los wonos in your panto antes?
No, but it did sort of expand my appreciation of humanity, in that I can sort of see the good and the bad and the utterly worthless in between. It made me realize, wow, some people really need help, and not, mentally, physically, something. They just need human interaction, like honest human interaction, the ability to go, oh wait, maybe what I'm doing right now, maybe not be the best idea, instead of just politely going, go on, yeah, you do you.
I've been seeing a lot of the bad,
really,
the worthless in between, and not a lot of the good, Georgios, recently.
Really? Well, what did you do? Did you go to a supermarket when there was like 5 minutes before closing?
No, well, that is horrendous. Because people don't plan.
No, they don't.
I'm one of them. Those are my people. Those people, Georgios, who just think, oh shit, I've been sitting here watching Wank Tube for the last 55 minutes when I should have been at the shop buying porridge for the morning, and I've got 2 minutes. And the security guard is saying to me, you've got to be quick. And I go, I know, I can tell the time, you bloody bald dickhead. And then you just end up wanting to slice everyone's eyeballs out because they're in your way. And frankly, yes, I am a snowflake libtard, Georgios. I am unique and the best in the world, and They should let me through. I'm one of those people, Georgios, and I love every one of them.
Okay.
And I would like to date some of the women I see in the supermarket occasionally.
Well, behind the counter or before?
Both.
All right, at the same time.
Both. I'm one of those, Georgios.
Lotharios.
I'm thinking of going Mormon. Is that offensive to the Mormons, Georgios?
I think nothing is offensive to the Mormons anymore.
Right. I don't know how that works, but amazing. So anyway, on to our topic of the day.
Yes.
We're talking about something
we have little experience with.
But we're going to get a lot of experience over the next 4 years, Georgios. Whether that be metaphorical, whether that be fake news, whether that be wig manufacturers calling for payment, Georgios. We're talking about conflict.
Yes.
And we're talking specifically, as this is a podcast about board games.
Wait, seriously?
I think so.
Wait, we're talking about board games the whole time?
I think we have been, yeah.
Well, me too.
To be honest, Georgios, I am most of the time in a laudanum haze.
All right, okay. Is that what you call your bathrobe now?
No, I'm an 18th century female poet, Georgios.
Ah, I see. Yeah, obviously, I could tell by your beard.
Yeah, under this rough exterior and large beard beats the heart
of Karl Marx,
of Mary Walthamstone Conankrantz, Georgios.
Conankrantz?
Yes, that was her maiden name.
Obviously.
But we're talking about conflict and sort of what types of conflict exist in games, and if conflict is, broadly speaking, a good thing. And the reason we're talking about this is that we sometimes talk off mic.
Well, almost never actually, but sometimes.
That'd be really difficult. We have to constantly walk around with mics and that.
Yeah,
just in case one of us phones each other. It'd be a real nightmare. George, could you hang on? I got to plug in the mic, and then you've got to go to a shop. Yeah. And excuse me, you've got a spare laptop I can plug the mic into, because I can't speak to this guy otherwise.
That is true. And
they're like, no. And I'm like, yes, you have. Everyone's got a laptop. Oh, all right. Jenny, weird bloke with microphones here again. Jenny, can he use...
The great thing is basically all the shops he visits, they're all English speakers.
And I live in Berlin. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Anyway, so we're talking about conflict. And this was inspired by, I was playing a game of Seafall.
All right.
And I did one of the actions that was available to me.
Apparently this is what you do in Seafall.
And one of the players decided that because he had named the island and had a colony on there, that if I were to do one of the actions, passive actions that was available to me, he would attack me and ruin, completely destroy all the plans I'd had for this one game. And you know, I was doing exceptionally badly in this particular game.
Right.
And I wanted to achieve one thing. And him attacking me basically ensured that I wouldn't be able to do what I'd wanted to do that game. And the game was a complete wash.
Right.
And I got really annoyed by this.
Yes.
Because it was within the rules of the game, but it was unnecessary. It was unnecessary conflict.
Right.
And he just did it because, well, this is what I do. I'm stamping my authority on this. And I told you, if you wanted to take that action, that this is what I was going to do. And frankly, I don't care either about how you feel or the way the game goes. And the problem, and
it's very impolite.
It was particularly galling with Seafall in that it's been a bit dull.
Right, yeah.
And I was attempting just to push the game forward. Not necessarily to my benefit, because I'm losing hugely anyway, but just to make something happen. And his action not only arrested my development in the game, but also arrested the development of the game in general.
Right, yeah.
And just to do something to establish his credentials as the biggest swinging dick in the room, he decided to basically tank the game for everybody. Which I took extreme exception to, and it made me think a lot about conflict and made me think maybe I'm not such a big fan of the whole concept of conflict in games anyway.
I think that's quite interesting because from the way you've described it to me, and if I think back on the similar experiences, it seems to me that we're not just talking about conflict within the game, even though that's how it expresses itself. That's basically the medium for where, you know, sort of fight out whatever conflict you have. But what you're talking about here is the social interaction, basically the way you relate to another player being somehow off, somehow unpleasant, somehow confrontational, and it bleeding over into the game. And by acting on whatever tension is between players, acting it out within the game, it leads to even more negative consequences for everyone, leading basically to negative feedback loop because you're already mad at somebody, or, you know, you feel like you need to clash horns with someone. You start playing a certain way. And by doing so, you reach this situation you've described where basically the game is tanked. Somebody's even more annoyed than before and for apparently very petty reasons. And that in turn goes back onto the social level where, you know, you lose something and you're mad at the person who made you lose. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
But what you're implying here is a pre-existing condition, and that certainly happens. You know, you don't like someone to begin with, and then that dictates your state of play. But also, I mean, it just, sometimes games facilitate this, and I think Seafall is in particular egregious in that I find the combat is antithetical to the development of the game. It slows the game down. And they feel like there's got to be combat in there. It's got to be dice rolling. But the problem is it just makes the game grind to a halt. It makes one player just reduce to nothing. Yeah. And maybe then even focus on revenge to the detriment of everyone.
Yeah.
And I think Seafall is in a particularly egregious example of conflict being tacked on when it needn't be there.
This is very interesting. I'm sorry for, again, plugging something I've written, but my experience with Star Trek Ascendancy, of which I've written a first impression piece on the website, was very similar. Like pretty much exactly what you described. At some point, the game turns into this war of attrition where you're not really pushing the game forward so much as pulling everyone back.
Right.
And by doing so, you're not just pulling that one person back. Depending on how things play out, you might actually slow down the entire game. All the progress that has been made just, grinds down to a halt until anything left is just, a bunch of ships just clashing into each other and hoping to take over a planet or something. It's like, it was a heartbreaking experience playing this game, but it worked in a similar way. You had sort of conflict, sort of turning the experience sour. And I want to go back to this idea of these two layers, because I think that has a lot to do with how conflict shows up in a game and how it can cause problems. In that generally when you sit down to play a game, like the furthest outer layer of the experience is a sense of, let's call it, for lack of a better word, cooperation.
Right.
You want to spend time with other people. You want to play with other people. You want to have a good time together. And you choose to do so by engaging in a game.
Right.
So that's when the first layer sort of comes in, right? We're playing a game, and this game pits us against each other. Now, this is the first sort of contradiction, or the first piece of tension you need to figure out. And like, this is something you usually learn as a kid. This idea of, it's just a game. There's this tension, people still like you, even though, they're fighting against you within the game, and sort of balancing this tension, realizing that you're basically holding two opposite stances to a person at the table, takes some learning. I mean, it might just be teaching you cognitive dissonance for all I know.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is why kids often react badly to being attacked in games.
Yeah.
React badly to losing, because actually, you're right, that's what you're doing. You've got two opposing ethoses coming together.
Right.
I thought we were supposed to be mates, and now you're doing this to me.
Exactly. And it still happens even with grown-ups.
Right, absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is that it seems to me there are games that I think where this dissonance hits and where people get annoyed, I think is where the game is engineered in a way that doesn't set your expectations up, right?
Right. But yes, and exactly. It doesn't set your expectations up, but also there's a lack of support to help you navigate these contradicting ethoses.
Right.
Ethi. Whatever that's called. Sort of helping you along. I think, again, I need to plug myself because apparently I'm fully into self-promotion now. When I did these small slices about etiquette, this was like the core issue I was trying to articulate. How do we set up ways in which we can easily navigate this contradiction? What do we do? How can we contribute into creating a game space, a game environment where we know we like each other, but we can still enjoy, being really, really mean to each other within the game. It never sort of bleeds into one another. You never stop fighting because you like someone, and you never get mad at somebody because they're constantly attacking you. I think this is the ideal that everybody claims they're capable of, but I have serious doubts about that. But this is basically what we all know we should be doing, but most of us don't quite know how to get there with every game and with every group.
Well, of course, your capability with that is dependent on so many factors, though, isn't it? Did you get fucked this week? Is your job shit? Have you drunk too much coffee? Did you get enough sleep? Is your kid annoying? All of those sort of things can lead into you acting in an adverse, unacceptable way to what would be a normal level of, for want of a better word, persecution within a game.
Right.
And I think, sometimes I'm very reactive to things, and sometimes I tend to go nuts over stuff that I really shouldn't.
Yeah.
And I think it's a matter of recognizing that and saying, okay, and pulling back and saying either I'm not going to continue to do this because I'm just not capable of doing this in an adult manner today.
Right.
Or afterwards saying, hey man, that was a bit rough, sorry. But I think there are times, I mean, the time in Seafall, I think the reason I was so annoyed by it is because it seemed a willful articulation of the rules to the detriment of everyone else.
Right, yeah.
That's what annoyed me. Because I said to him, look, if you do this, I'm not going to be able to do this. We're stuck in a quagmire here. I'm not threatening you when it comes to winning the game, but we're stuck in a quagmire and we're not going to be able to discover this. I need this to be able to facilitate that. And he went, I don't care.
Interestingly enough, that reminds me of the very first time I think we've played together, which was Twilight Imperium. In fact,
indeed, that was a roaring success.
I still love the game, all its flaws and warts, but I mean, this is literally the kind of. I mean, you might remember I got into a bit of a fight with another player.
You did,
and it was exactly for the same reason you just articulated. It was this idea of like, you're you're giving me shit and it's making me really uncomfortable and it's making me really feel really excluded, and you're just having a laugh and you're ignoring how your actions affect other players, and that just really pissed me off even more. So these are dark secrets.
And it's hippy-dippy, you know, it is hippy-dippy. And if you explain
with hippy-dippy.
No, and you explain it and people go, come on now, grow up. And there is an element of that. But the fact is there is a social dynamic going on, which is the reason to play, which is the sole reason to play, that you're going to get together and have fun with people you like, right?
Be inclusive. I think the core tenet of any board game is to be inclusive.
And you're fundamentally betraying that core reason to play if when you see someone start to become unhappy, whether you agree with their reasons for being unhappy or not, and there are lots of reasons to not, but to continue to twist the knife and to claim that rules are the thing that gives you fucking clemency, that's betraying the core reason to play.
I agree.
And, you know, you see those facile memes that go around on Facebook all the time that say, you know, people are carrying a weight that you will never understand. Be a nice guy. And yes, it is trite and it is a little facile. And if someone, you can objectively say, I think if someone's objectively being a dickhead in a situation, I think you have a perfect right to say, stop being a dickhead.
Yeah.
But there is this element of just acknowledging that maybe someone's having a shitty day.
Yeah.
And that's why they're acting in this manner.
Oh, sure.
So maybe just dial it back a bit.
I think there's one option, that people aren't aware of when they're stuck in a situation like that. Or maybe they feel that they're not allowed to use. And that is quite literally let's call the polite version of flipping the table, of just going, all right, let's stop the game for a moment and let's talk about what's going on here. Because this is really annoying me, and it's not a tactic, it's not a strategy. I'm not trying to fool you so you can let me win. This is really bugging me, and we need to talk this out. And I've often felt that I've had these situations. I've witnessed some of these situations in gaming groups in the past, and I always felt like you should literally stop playing right now, because you're getting on each other's nerves to an extent that's not only bad for you. You're feeling both awful. You're getting into fights. It's bad for everyone else because they feel awkward and uncomfortable and they're not having any fun in part because they're powerless to actually help you. You're still, forcing yourself stuck in this game. To be stuck in this game, to continue to pursue victory points or area majorities, what have you, even though you're both making each other miserable. And I think maybe you just need to occasionally be the party pooper and just go, all right, I'm taking a step back. I need to talk this out. I don't feel comfortable. And it doesn't need to be like, it doesn't even have to reach the level of people talking about awful stuff that just, is really, really problematic and traumatic for you. Like, I mean, you mentioned a recent experience where somebody was talking about, I think, abortion or funny ways of rape, which in itself is a hilarious concept. Now, I'm not just talking about this. You need sometimes to just be aware, like, I'm playing this game, and I'm not just frustrated because I'm losing, which is fine, which I think most of us can deal with.
Whenever I'm sat at a table playing a game, I'm in a constant state of frustration because I'm losing.
Yeah, frustration is part of all games anyway. But at some point, you need to acknowledge, all right, this stepped over a line personally for me. Not because of the topic, but just because of the tension I'm feeling right now. It ceased to be enjoyable. It ceased to be part of acceptable frustration within the game. It became something personal. And that's when you really need to sort of stop. You need to just admit, right, fine, this is not working. We need to talk, or we need to stop playing this game or whatever, but we need to, have some acknowledgement of things happening here instead of just ignoring them, shutting them out and acting like this is just normal.
And it's really interesting because
#this is not normal.
When we whatever hobby it is, whatever interest you have, because it's what it is essentially is a leisure activity.
Yes.
It's something you're doing.
A cultural activity.
It's something you're doing when you're not working. It's something, because we are conditioned very much in our societies to say work is shit and leisure activities are great and they've got to be great and every moment you've got to snatch.
Yeah.
Because, in work you're being ground into the floor, all the time. So we expect and we desire and we want so much every second of this leisure activity to be great, and we will it to be fabulous. But sometimes you can watch a football match and it's shit. You can go to a film and it's boring. You can play a game and it's just frustrating.
Yeah.
And what we don't do is just sometimes say, look, this is crap, right? Should we knock it on the head for tonight and go and do something else? And that is legitimate sometimes.
Yes.
To just say, look, I'm sorry, I've got issues, I'm being a dickhead, I think it's best if I leave, or this is crap, we're obviously not in the mood for this.
Yeah. Let's
just sit down and chat or go and have a pint or whatever, because we want everything to be perfect. And it so rarely is. And our will and our desire for it to be perfect stops us acknowledging when it's not.
Yes. Perfect is the enemy of the good.
Indeed. So let's get a bit more sort of gamey.
Right.
So what do you see as the type of conflict that exists in games? I mean, mechanically is what I'm talking about here. So the way I see it, you have your classic two demarcations, right?
Maybe.
You have your active and your passive aggressive.
Actually, I would flip them out a bit. I would not flip them out. I would.
I'm going to fucking flip out in a minute if you disagree with me once more.
I'll spread them out a bit because yes, general active and passive, yes. But I think with active conflict, you have things like destructive conflict where you take things away that somebody else has.
Right.
You have like blocking conflict, which is active conflict. You're reducing options other people have, like in hate drafting. You're actively doing something that, well, I'm done. Let me just expand. Maybe I'll cover some of your ideas as well. I would point this into active conflict because you're consciously and directly trying to affect other players. With passive conflict, on the other hand, and one of the examples I remember was dominant species, is basically what you do is going to screw over somebody else. You can't help it. You can sort of take it into account and sort of pick one of the options that help you, that are most detrimental to the person that is in the lead, maybe. But in the end, you're basically not looking to affect other players, but it just happens as a matter of course. And I think there's probably a fourth one with passive, but I can't quite think of it. I think I'm Rick Perrying this now. So I think those are the distinctions I would make. Conflict which is sought, which is actively pursued, and conflict that just happens because the game does not give you any other option.
But without wanting to be granular,
yes,
and to be even more navel-gazing, I think this sort of passive-aggressive blocking thing, I think the fundamental thing about that is you have a kind of get-out clause in that you're saying, I'm not targeting one particular person. I am doing what the game compels me to do, therefore I have to cover this space.
Oh yeah, but that's not, yes, I understand that.
I mean, it depends on play style. I mean, for me,
literally the explanation that really pisses me off.
Well, for me though, the denial of someone else's ability to score points is only ever a side bonus for me. This is why I guess I don't win games very much, because I'm simply going for what Gil Hover calls the Fiore moment.
Oh, yeah.
That moment of instant joy, where you do something and it's beneficial to you and you think, poof, and it doesn't matter that moment of benefit might completely car crash you down the line. That's not the issue. That instant moment of benefit is what I'm constantly going for in games. I'm very much like that as a person. You know, instant gratification is my thing. One of those kids, I would have eaten the one marshmallow. Fuck the 2 marshmallows. Don't want 2 marshmallows.
Wow, who would want 2 marshmallows?
Well, marshmallows are fucking jank anyway. But, so, it's only a side benefit for me in Eurogames. If I'm blocking someone or I'm doing something that denies someone else something, if it means that I then go on to win, that's great, but that's not my intention. So, for me, I have a get out there because I'm legitimately not trying to fuck other people over. I'm trying to benefit myself maximally.
No, I can totally see that. I think the so-called Eurogames sort of thrive in this area of player behavior. And I think, as I mentioned before, this argument that I'm not attacking you, I'm just doing what's beneficial to me. I've heard this said so often in ways that are blatantly not true. The idea of pushing sort of the game mechanics as an excuse for your own behavior. This is what really annoys me about a lot of Eurogames when I play them. Again, very group dependent. But recently I've played Inish, and one of the players said something very, very interesting in that he felt that Inish was much more confrontational than Kemet.
Right.
Which I do not agree with at all. But he felt that with Kemet, he could always blame the game. But with Inish, when he had the choice to attack someone, when it was his decision to attack someone, it was out in the open. So basically, he was arguing that games that actually draw attention to somebody attacking somebody else actively are worse than games that give you as you said, a get out clause.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? I think this is why when Kemet is predicated on conflict, that's what the game is.
Right.
It's essentially an engine to deliver conflict. Whereas Inish has options.
Yes.
You can exert soft power in Inish. You can just spread out and put your guys places and then you can win the game. You don't necessarily have to fight. I mean, you will, but but you don't necessarily have to. And so the active decision to say, right, now I am choosing to attack you and you above other people is certainly something that is going to inflame people's ire. And it's certainly something that is prone to what you dislike, which is no, I'm just doing what the game told me. Yeah. When you're basically lying because what you're doing is doing something to wind someone up, or to prove a point or a political ethos.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, in Seafall, this guy said, this is what I've decided to do.
All right,
this is what I, on principle, think is the right thing to do. Therefore, I'm going to do it regardless of context. So this is why I tend to have absolutely no problems with games that instantly go out to promote conflicts, that are conflict generating machines. I tend to like them less, but that's by the by. I find the conflict in those necessary. Yeah. And so therefore utterly acceptable.
See, to me, it plays out somewhat differently. I vastly prefer Inish to Kemet because of what you just said. Kemet does not give me a choice.
Right.
Kemet basically tells me you need to attack. It doesn't matter what you do, you're going to attack someone. It's the only thing you can do. The question is only how you're going to attack them, and not whether, when, or who. It's just how are you going to attack these people. This taking away of choice really bugs me in games.
Well, it limits the profundity of the game, right?
It does, yes. I think the more I talk about games, the more I realize that I'm very big on agency, on player agency.
Absolutely.
I want players to have as much influence or as much freedom of choice in what they do and how they play the game as is possible. I mean, if you followed some of the discussions I've had on the forum where I talk about, why do we only have one victory condition? Why don't we have multiple victory conditions? Why don't we only have one winner? Why don't we have multiple winners? Why are our games not giving us more choices? Is what I'm saying. I think this is true about conflict as well. I like I respect and I can appreciate conflict that it's out in the open. Or basically where somebody goes, right, I'm going to attack you. Because then you can really tell why they're attacking you. Because you're in the lead. I want to win. The only way to win is to sort of slow you down. I'm going to attack you. And I have no issues with that. I was playing Cosmic Encounter recently, and basically this happened. At some point I was in the lead and everybody was aligned, was in an alliance against me. And that's fine. This is something I have absolutely no problem with because it's open, it's a choice, and it makes sense within the game. And there's no question about any of these other layers sort of being influenced by this. Whereas in games where things are hidden, where you're not openly admitting to picking on someone or all these things, that's where, you get these bleed into other layers. That's where you go, wait, why are you attacking me when you have no benefit?
Right. The only option is to destroy me, not benefit you. I'm kicking down your sandcastle.
Yeah.
And, I might actually have huge insecurity issues. And on the outside...
tiny, tiny hands.
And, a really terrible piss-coloured wig.
Yes, piss-coloured, definitely.
But, I may look confident on the outside, but really I'm a husk of a human being. But kicking down your sandcastle makes you suffer, so misery loves company, right? And these misery love company games really have no inherent enjoyment to me. I think the raise mechanic in Imperial Settlers is there because they feel it's a civilization game, you should have some conflict. The player PvP attacking in Seafall retards the game, slows the game, and is there because they kind of felt it should be in there. There are strong voices within the community.
Yes.
Who constantly call for interaction, direct player interaction with games, and that's the goal of the game. And so therefore, there are certain voices that have, to my mind, absolutely, totally out of whack influence with their ability to adequately judge things. And
we're talking about ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And so they influence people who design games, and you see this raft of games that bolt on player interaction, where the game would have existed perfectly fine without those things. And I am an unabashed multiplayer solitaire fan. I adore it. I love building my own world and watching it develop and create, and then at the end of the game comparing it with other people. I'm also fine playing Inish. I'm also fine playing Kemet. But if I were to sit in a wheelhouse, it would be that being able to use my own cognizance against the game to try and do as well as I can. And you see these games that are beautifully designed, and then they bolt on this conflict mechanic onto the side because it's the accepted thinking that you've got to have player interaction.
Actually, let me just
one example is Legacy, Testament of Duke de Crecy.
Yeah.
With the expansion putting the player interaction in, which completely slowed the game down and bogged it down in this pointless negotiation where the game was a beautiful multiplayer solitaire that worked wonderfully on its own.
See, I need to kind of defend this criticism of multiplayer solitaire, or rather, I need to kind of defend this call for player interaction. I firmly believe the games are about interaction. I don't think they have to necessarily be purely in-game, but I think games should facilitate interaction between the people playing. I think the problem is, and I agree with your criticism there, when it's tacked on is when the only kind of interaction that is tacked on is the thing that I named destructive interaction.
Right.
The kind of thing that sets back whatever you've tried to achieve on your own. There are many ways to achieve interaction. I think Seven Wonders, even Dominion, famously called a low or non-interaction game, has subtle ways in which you do interact with other players. You do sort of need to feel, you need to pay attention to others. You need to sort of try to get into the head of other players. What are they pursuing? What strategy they're going for? And those are great. And if games incorporate these kind of elements, my desire for interaction is sufficiently fulfilled.
Right.
And I agree with you. If the only interaction that gets bolted on is the ability to destroy somebody else's engine or destroy whatever progress they've made, that's just lazy, crappy design. So to some extent, I can see, I'm sort of in between those two chairs. On the one hand, yes, more interaction is good. I like interaction. I think interaction is essential. And I'm not opposed to multiplayer solitaire. I'm fine with those games, but I kind of prefer more interaction to less interaction.
Okay, so just to wrap up.
Yes.
And this is going to be a very...
We have to wrap? I'm really bad at rhyming.
I'm very good.
Ah, I see.
I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Anyway, so just a very broad question, just to wrap up. Broadly speaking, how do you feel about conflict in games?
Broadly speaking, I feel I'm a conflict-averse person for the sole reason that I don't like the way it often ends in tension. I like interaction a lot, like I just said. I don't mind destructive interaction, but at the end of the day, I want the gaming experience to be pleasant or at least funny, but I don't want it to be tense or awkward. Conflict, depending on how it plays out in the game, how it's implemented, in my experience, always runs the risk of turning a pleasant gaming experience, even if it's just limited to this one game and sort of evaporates 10 minutes later, of turning a pleasant gaming experience into an awkward or a tense one. And these are moments that I prefer to avoid. I mean, we've played games before. You know, I can be very, full of schadenfreude. I enjoy just being chaotic, just, blowing things up, just, because I can, because I think it's funny. But the moment I realize this does not generate laughter, I stop. And I also, when I realize in this game, it does not generate fun, like it does in Cosmic Encounter, for example, I kind of enjoy myself less in these types of games. So basically conflict, yes, as long as it stays pleasant and fun, I guess.
Conflict for me needs to either be the MO of the game. So going in that that's the deal, or it needs to be something that pushes the game forward, doesn't pull the game back. Because I have no issue with someone using conflict to accelerate the game state, to get to the point at the end where they can say, haha, look, I've won, or whatever. And I have no issue with king-making either.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I've been accused of king-making so many times where it's literally my only bloody choice. I can only do this. What do you want me to do? I'm sorry it gives him the game, but this is all I can do, you know. And so I have no issue with that. The big issue with conflict that I have is twofold. One, where it seems that it's been put in as an addendum to the game. Just because, it should have it. And secondly, my fundamental big issue with conflict is the recourse to legalese.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's in the game. It's in the rules.
Yeah.
I'm allowed. I don't care that you're crying. I'm allowed to do it. And yes, we should all grow up and all of that sort of stuff. And we should respect people who are good at playing games and are great at leveraging the rules. But no, sorry. Fundamentally, the core of what you're doing is sitting around with people and enjoying their company. And if your recourse to the rules undermines that, you don't deserve to sit and play.
Actually, if 2016 has taught us anything, we should never respect people who are only good at leveraging the rules.
Anyway, now, Georgios,
yes.
I don't want to, promote conflict, but you're a floppy-haired twat who wears stupid four-eyed glasses and have a shave, you knobhead.
Aww.
Dominance, control. These things the unjust seek most of all, and so it is the duty of the just to defy dominance and to challenge control. I don't know who Robert Fanny is, but he said that. I'm TC Petty III, and this is Deep Design with TC Petty III. The pros and cons of dominant strategies. Now, I know a few things about being dominant, since I am a male and Caucasian. Not only does sexual dimorphism provide me with a few extra inches of height, but my race makes it much more likely that you'll feel comfortable asking me for directions if you're lost. But there are certainly pros and cons to my clear domination of the human gene pool, even if I can't think of any at the moment. I'm sure there must be a downside somewhere. But life isn't a game, and if it were, it'd be a poorly designed asymmetrical game that would be laughed out of the marketplace and put into Humble Bundle 3 years after release, along with 10 other games that no one has ever heard about. Dominant strategies in games are strategies that emerge during play that result in the best chances of a player winning. From a mathematical perspective, they are choices that are always the best, no matter what choices other players make, but we'll get into why I think that definition is wishy-washy. For most early designers, it's best to just say, these are bad and should be avoided. But the real answer is a little deeper. A note on the prisoner's dilemma. When I talk about dominant strategies, the first thing that always pops up is the prisoner's dilemma. And honestly, every year I take a self-reflective moment to watch a YouTube video that fully explains the prisoner's dilemma problem so that I can keep my game design decisions grounded. So that when I'm creating a massive pretentious hybrid Euro game about the rise and fall of punk music in the late 1970s, I can remind myself that tension and interaction between players at its most basic level is what makes games worth playing in a multiplayer setting and what really defines the role of the tabletop over the digital space. But I think the prisoner's dilemma is stupid. That's a personal thing, and it's totally elitist, but after I've played a game or two in that vein, a strict binary decision with a clear dominant strategy just seems pedantic and arbitrary to discuss, and it boils down to, are you lying, or are you not lying? I find the systems surrounding that decision to be much more worth exploring. Yes, with some knowledge of the prisoner's dilemma and iterative removal of strictly weaker options, we will play games more optimally. But games with any level of complexity or long-term goals will generally add in social and economic variables that branch off in thousands of directions, effectively obfuscating the true dominance of any one strategy. Good games create decisions that have consequences, and a pure mathematical approach doesn't always work. So what I am talking about is whether a dominant strategy in your game is good, and if it's bad, and how you can remove it or alter it so that everyone compliments you for being so goddamn clever. Analysis of dominant strategies. Jeez. I'm generally a good first player of games, not because I'm especially intelligent and handsome, both of which are very true, but because I have a knack for deconstructing a system and finding the most greedy strategies. For example, Power Grid is a game with an extremely simple, greedy, effective strategy. The strategy is spend. Spend as much of your money as you can on building your network every turn for the first 4 or 5 turns and power as much as you can. Sure, there are other things going on, but the amount of money that you make each turn for expanding makes saving money to buy things next turn pointless. I have won so many games by simply abusing this. Does this make Power Grid a bad game? Well, I think more importantly, the amount of mathematical calculations to play well in the game is going to alienate more people than this dominant strategy. And by using this greedy dominant strategy well, I think it actually allows you to do all the fun things in the game. By expanding and exploring each turn, you gain the ability to explore and expand more and compete well for resources. I would argue that the incentives here are clearly being reinforced well, and it results in a solid game that then allows players to focus on maneuvering the other more visceral and tense aspects of network building in the game. But people have to be aware of this strategy, and it may take a few plays to understand. On the flip side, take Yahtzee. How do you win at Yahtzee? You roll fucking Yahtzees. Because not only does a Yahtzee score the best possible points in a given category, your first Yahtzee scores 50 extra points, and each additional Yahtzee scores another 100 points. It's infuriatingly idiotic, old-school game design. The reason? Slot machine mentality. I'm sorry, European listeners, fruit machine mentality. Oh my god. I pulled a lever and I won. I am so fucking smart. People love that shit. But I would posit that Yahtzee is a stupid game for stupid babies. It has all these interesting possible decisions tempered by press your luck elements and then ruins it all by rewarding players with a completely randomly achieved dominant strategy. Here's what should happen, in my completely elitist opinion. A player is allowed to roll one Yahtzee per game. There's no Yahtzee category. They are not given a bonus for doing so, and it just results in one category having a really good score. However, all future Yahtzees are penalized by a player having to cross off and score 0 points in an unused category of their choice. This means that getting lucky in a game of Yahtzee is then tempered by risk. Very little risk, honestly, but still fucking something. So despite what the haters may want you to believe, dominant strategies exist in a gray area of game design. They aren't strictly bad or good and are subjective to taste in many cases. I humbly present 2 more case studies for debate. A few years back, the designers of Magic the Gathering decided to make a significant change to the game by recasting the card Counterspell. For 13 years, this card went unchallenged. In Magic, decks can have a maximum of 4 duplicates of any one card. 4 copies of Counterspell was a staple in any deck that contained the color blue. In fact, the entire identity of the color blue was predicated on the dick nature of this one card. So, Magic designers did something extremely smart and made the card cost 1 more mana to cast. Suddenly, it was still great, but carried with it an actual decision for players to include it in their decks. Cue the delicious, whiny tears of thousands of teenage players who were super sad that all their blue decks were ruined for all eternity. I think it was brilliant. When a card is so good that there's no decision as to whether you should include it in your deck, the card is a dominant strategy, and uninteresting. For another good example, the original set of Dominion introduced the Chapel, which introduced the entire world to the most counterintuitive strategy in engine building ever, removing cards to make your engine more efficient, culling your deck. However, when the Chapel is included in a game, suddenly the entire objective of the game shifts towards it. There's a pile of special cards lying in the center of the table, and they are all worthless. Players should remove all victory point cards and coppers from their deck with the Chapel and only buy silver and gold. And by honing your deck into a series of perfect draws, you buy provinces for big victory points until the pile is gone. Every game. So the Chapel isn't necessarily broken, and when players first discover it, the feeling is amazing, but it makes all other strategies obsolete and really emphasizes the fact that you could just ignore all the cool cards and buy money every turn. Very problematic.
So TC,
what's up?
When is it good?
Dominant strategies are good when they are highly contested and the main focus of the game. If players know you win by scoring victory points, and the way to do that is controlling areas on the board, then if a player is mad that they built all these cool temples and lost, well, it's not a game about building temples, dickhead. So you're good. Unless you know building temples is more fun, then maybe you're the dickhead for not making a temple building game. Just saying. Dominant strategies can also be good when there's a choice between lesser, safer plays versus obvious, contested, dangerous plays. A game like Broom Service or Glass Road does this well. There's a lot of action cards that are just better to choose if no one else was playing the game with you, but the problem is, everyone knows they're the best. So if multiple people play them, it makes those cards worse. Basically, make sure players still have room to maneuver outside the dominant strategy, and if those sideshows define the robust experience, then clear dominant strategy can be fine.
So TC,
Yeah?
when is it bad?
A dominant strategy is bad when it's unexpected and becomes the dominant mode of play to the detriment of everything else. If area control is the focus of your game, and a card combination gains you more victory points than area control, that's not apparent, and probably not good. Especially if this means that several other avenues of gameplay are ignored because of it. The other bad is when greedy play is the dominant strategy. What's a greedy strategy? Basically, it's when the game rewards the player for playing one aspect of the game well and provides no negative feedback loop or resistance to the thing. It could be a spam-heavy strategy where a player chooses the same option every turn and ignores everything else, but it could also be that the game is about gaining victory points, and so I simply choose to buy only things that give me the most victory points. It's when there's absolutely no subtlety to winning. Blunt, forward progress should never be the consistent way to attain victory in a strategy game.
Practical ways to eliminate dominant strategies.
Dominant strategies are the reason why if you're making a good game, you may lose playtesters along the way. People enjoy finding that best strategy, and when it works, they tend to claim it as their own, nurture it, and allow it to suckle upon their breast like their own ugly human baby. And when you nerf said strategy for the good of the game, many players feel that you are drowning their baby. And most importantly, you are the worst of them all. Like a parent that can't possibly understand how their own vomit-spackled, drool-encrusted shit machine isn't the cutest and bestest baby in the whole wide world, you're going to cling to certain overpowered aspects of your games. Think instead of your game design as a local baby rental service with wriggling, ugly human babies piled to the ceiling. While you may grab one or two each game, you want to make sure that even the cutest babies in that noxious cage have disadvantages, and that you can always return and rent out a new baby when you grow tired of it. Take a step back, be as objective as possible, and balance the shit out of your game. I'll give you two main ways: restrict or incentivize. Now, it will take more time and playtesting to balance, but generally, incentivizing other strategies is the best way to eliminate a dominant strategy. This avoids adding an extra rule or exception to the game, which can sometimes feel strange, difficult to remember, or arbitrary. Lower costs, raise potential points awarded. Having multiple strategies and opportunities for players that compete in their effectiveness and shift due to player interaction creates a really nice playing field. The other option is to add an arbitrary restriction. This could be something like, only do this action once per turn, or could require a hand size limitation, but something that limits the effectiveness of this unexpected development so that first-time players never even feel tempted to abuse it. It's really important to use the proper wording to eliminate players spamming the same action repeatedly. And you know what? There's always a third option: kill it. Zap it with radiation and excise that benign tumor. If no one even likes the strategy, why salvage it? It's only natural to want to dominate everyone and everything you come into contact with at all times. We all have metaphorical dicks that we like to swing, and some of us even have literal ones, and also ones that curve a little to the left. But now that you are armed with the essential knowledge needed to both massage vigorously and circumcise this natural impulse that is at odds with solid game design, hopefully you'll be able to put these concepts into use safely in your own home with other consenting adults. The safe word is Yahtzee.
Hey everyone, if you're listening to us from Europe or even Germany, may I suggest checking out our sponsor YOLO-games.com. Heiko always has a great selection of games ready to ship to you at great prices. There's Guilds of London for a mere €53.99, a pleasant looking game full of cutthroat tactics and clever area majority play. There's also Cosmic Incursion for $23.99, the first expansion for hobby mainstay Cosmic Encounter, featuring one of the most lauded and recommended features of Cosmic, the reward deck that makes defending other players' planets actually appealing. A great addition to an already great game, and if all that stuff is too childish for you, why not have a look at the impressive selection of war games, which you can also find at YOLO-games.com. And if you do order something, tell them Perfect Information sent you. It won't do anything, but it sounds cool. That's YOLO-games.com.
Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the guild. Oh, Georgios.
Well, you sat down with a woomph.
I certainly did. It's been busy. Well, I'm sat down. I'm glad I got to sit down. I haven't been able to sit down the last few days. It's been really busy in here.
What? Did you need to buy a paddle?
No. I mean, yes, but that's not the reason. It's just there's been no available seating arrangement, Georgios.
That is true.
People have been coming in
and going out,
talking about loads of different things. I heard some blokes at the bar.
Blokes, yes.
At the bar talking about whether games are art.
You're sounding more and more rural.
You've got an incredible palette of accents, George.
I do. It's basically the same with different pitches.
And then, there were some other blokes in the corner just saying, "Oh, I heard about this podcast. It was bloody great, it was. I'd like to thank you for your..." And I don't know what podcast they were talking about.
Well, I think there are two of them. I think there's Keeping It 1600 and Serial.
I love Keeping It 1600. Is that actually a podcast?
Yes.
I thought that was a clever title you'd come up with then.
No, I'm not clever. I keep telling you I'm not clever. I'm stealing everything I've put into this podcast from the internet.
Because I thought that was the Donald Trump election manifesto.
No, interestingly enough, it was a strongly don't put Donald Trump into the White House kind of podcast.
Yeah, well.
Like most of them are.
That worked, didn't it? Just goes to show, Georgios.
Podcasts will change the world.
That the literati have an incredible deep impact on societal differences and that, don't they?
Pretty much, yeah. But now, hush, I'm trying to pay attention to people over there talking about the professionalism, about something about board games.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, I've got to get this because frankly, Georgios, Frankly, is that the brother of Angly? Yeah, that's right. Frankly, yeah. He does all the shit.
Hulk
films.
2 still hulking.
Hulk 2 still hulking. Crouching Lobster, Hidden Monkey. One very good.
Yeah, no. The Ice Capades, I remember, yeah. Oh, wait, no. Frank Lee did Pride, More Pride, and Still Priding. It's a very gay themed movie. I quite like it.
Yeah, it's good.
It's the only good thing he did.
Colourful cover. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so anyway, because, I need to talk about something else, Georgios, because, no, don't get me wrong here.
I'll try.
I'm happy that me and Janine are back together. Ecstatic, in fact. Mm-hmm. And my...
are you talking about the nipple clamps or...
No, actually, to be honest, the sex is wonderful.
Yes.
And she's actually...
Are you allowed to share it now?
Yeah.
She's not just watching then?
No.
Oh, good,
She's calmed down on the old BDSM thing.
Oh.
So I think that was just because she was angry with me, Georgios.
Yes, apparently... no. I don't think it's a common factor in BDSM couples, but it may be.
Well, she only would implement it when I hadn't done the washing up or something.
Well, I'm not entirely sure that's the proper definition of BDSM, but sure, whatever floats your boat.
Hey, if smacking me on the buttocks with the Hoover pipe, Georgios, is not BDSM, I don't know what the bloody hell is.
I believe that.
But, now we're moving back in together. Mm-hmm. It's just a bit stressful because, I just like... She wants all the walls...
You are articulate.
She wants all the walls magnolia, Georgios. Because she's talking about resale value and she's talking about, not putting off potential buyers. And we fucking bought the place. It's not even our fucking bloody house. And I'm just like, well, why don't we paint the walls bloody rainbow coloured, darling? It'll make us all feel sexuality and that. You'll come in, you think, oh, look at all them colours. I'm right ready for a shagging. And
do you think that's what that flag represents? Sexual prowess?
No, I'm not talking about the gay rainbow.
Oh, right.
I'm talking about the Ben and Janine rainbow, where we swapped some of the colours around.
So red and black are closer together.
Exactly, because black's in the original rainbow as well.
Clearly.
Anyway, but yeah, it's safe to say, just a bit stressful over decorating at the moment.
Well, see it as a good sign. If somebody is willing to actually put an effort into making it a pretty place that the two of you are going to share, there's a decent probability that it will not be a short-term thing.
Well, I hope one day to...
Like at least 2 weeks,
Well, I want to partake in nuptials one of these days, Georgios.
Is that a chocolate thing? It's like nougat?
No, that's getting married, Georgios. Something to do with squirrels, something to do with nougat. It's getting married. It's walking up the aisle. It's seeing her beaming face behind that veil as she says, I do, Ben, I do.
Oh, you have another friend called Ben?
I'm gonna knife you in the fucking face. I find it very unfair that you would assume that someone couldn't extend their heartly passions towards me, Georgios.
Oh, I can imagine that. Just not everyone.
I've a man who's got a lot to give, and Janine is a lady who's willing to receive.
Well, STDs are current currency.
So anyway, we asked the question.
We did, yes.
Is the inevitable professionalism of board gaming a good thing?
Yes.
And Tony Boydell, the doyen of British game design...
You need to help me out here. I lost my thesaurus. What's a doyen?
A doyen like the sort of... What's the word I'm looking for?
Don't say doyen because that's not going to be helpful.
First among equals of British game design.
Like communist chair.
Yeah, when you think of...
Like Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, when you think of... I don't know, when you think of singers...
Yes.
You think Kiri Takanawa. When you think
that is usually what I think when I wake up in the morning.
When you think of dancers, you think of Darcy Bustle. When you think of demagogues, you think of
Ben Maddox,
Dungeons and Dragons. And when you think of British game designers...
I'm sorry, are you just putting random words in an order and trying to confuse me?
That's what speaking is. Random words in an order.
To confuse me.
That's not my sole goal.
Yeah, you see it now.
But anyway, what does he say anyway? What does he say, the doyen of British game design?
It takes a bit longer. But basically, I think, he does actually reach out, brings up some very salient points.
Quite a meander though, isn't it?
Quite a meander. It took me a while to get to. But I think if I get his gist, I think he's saying... No.
Sorry.
No, yes. Yes, he's saying yes.
No, he's saying yes.
Yes,
exactly.
That's what he's saying.
He literally said yes. He offered no qualifiers. He offered no explanations. He's just saying it like it is, Georgios. He says what other people are thinking, Georgios, but too afraid to say.
Oh, so it's very hippy-dippy, really.
Tony Boydell.
The man who says yes. Are you saying Tony Boydell is a yes man?
Well, in this case, absolutely 100%, because that's literally all he said, was yes.
So, Tony, you're a yes man.
All right, let's go on to another doyen of game design, but more of the Berlin scene, even though he's not a Berliner himself.
Well, that's very complicated.
Jeffrey Allers, famous designer of Alia Acta Est and Citrus.
Yes,
and
famous.
New Amsterdam. Georgios.
Okay.
All very well regarded games. What did he say about professionalism in gaming?
Well, he basically says that professionalism essentially means that designers are finding it, should have an easier time finding an audience for the games, which is a great thing. What I personally think is the best argument. The real mark of professionalism is better royalties for game designers.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if publishers make any money. I can't imagine they make huge amounts of money unless you're a really big company. But the point is, you've noticed with the professionalism of hobby games, it's not just been that the royalties have improved, which I assume they have, and game designers can come and gainsay me on this, but also the recognition of the designer of the game.
Yeah.
So you look at your Hasbro games, there's no name on the box. There's no recognition that this was done by anybody, created by anybody. Mm-hmm. But board gaming is now becoming much more along the lines of sort of book publishing in that, the author is a stamp of authority, it's a stamp of approval, and that's a sign of professionalism.
Interestingly enough, I thought, I think way back then, in the past, when we talked about Eurogames and Ameritrash, I think I might have mentioned something about this idea of, in the 90s, the concept of designer games coming up. The idea that the person responsible for putting together the rules, the idea, the implementation, what have you, gets their name on the box and becomes sort of recognized for it. This being something that kind of reached a broader audience in the 90s with Catan, with Carcassonne, with German names like Teuber, Knizia, becoming, recognizable to gamers. I think to some extent this might have been the case before in a much smaller circle. I believe some of the war games had names attached to them.
Right.
But I'm not familiar enough with any war game scenes, just what I picked up here and there. But yes, definitely with the 90s and beyond, you had a stronger emphasis on the designer as a creator of a game, as a creator of this unique gaming experience that you're going to have available to you once you put it on the gaming table. So this step into drawing more attention to the creation of it, to maybe even the craft and the art of game design does suggest that it's not just purely cottage industry. It does become more professional step by step.
And with authors, you have character. You have expectations and you have particular genres and nuances, and that really puts pay to the thing that, you just roll dice and move a thing around a board, right?
Yeah.
It's about, what always amazes me with games is because I came into gaming, through Monopoly and Game of Life and all of those sorts of things, is that you have this machine that sort of has, and these machines have a million different ways of starting. It's not just pressing an on button like a device in your kitchen. You have to do X or Y to get the machine to start, and then the machine sort of runs. And I've always found that wonderful within games. Right. And it's not your normal sort of roll the dice, which is your equivalent of pressing the button on the microwave, right? It's all of these millions of ways to get these beautiful machines to function, and that's just a wonderful aspect of gaming. And if professionalism is that gets to more people, and more people understand that this is what it can be, then that's a wonderful, wonderful thing, I think.
Oh, yeah. I think professionalism just means that it becomes something that's self-sustainable. It's not just a flight of fancy from some guy who wants to spend however many dollars, pounds, euros, whatever, into producing 250 copies of his idea of a game, but it becomes something that people can live off.
Yeah.
It's something that can sort of sustain a lifestyle.
And it gets better, because the more time you have to devote to something, the better you become at it, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
So, Ender number 7, Isaac Shalev, who still hasn't invited me to be on board games. What does he say?
He's saying that he makes an interesting distinction between corporatism and professionalism, and that while corporatism is tried and sort of criticized when it comes to iPhones or S7s or laptops, professionalism does bring in real money, talent, business skills, and all these kind of things to just make it better. But he does point out that there is kind of something lost from the transition of, I don't know if he calls it amateur stage or just indie spirit to professionalism, which is, again, it's a fascinating opposition, because, like I said in our last episode, I'm not entirely sold on the idea that not only whether it applies to board games, but generally whether it applies as an idea in general. I think the distinction between the two is much fuzzier than we're led to believe.
And I think it shows the thriving of any industry, where you can have this really vibrant indie spirit and more glitzy professional stuff, and they coexist.
Yeah.
And, the internet is that, especially,
without the glitzy stuff.
Well,
it's mostly just, gooey and sticky
but the noughties, this wild west of the internet, and all of these new companies coming up and offering. And I remember in the sort of late 90s listening to, when the internet was first becoming a real thing, and listening to they interviewed a guy and said, what do you think of the internet? And he was this famous comedian in Britain at the time, and he said, I don't see the point. It's just like a big encyclopedia, and I don't see that it's ever going to really have an impact. And no one could envisage the internet just becoming this central hub of everyone's lives.
I like the idea of somebody saying a giant encyclopedia being a bad thing.
Right.
This is just amazing.
And, I love Essen for many reasons, but one of them is seeing the guy who's cut his own cards and carved his own game out of wood next to Asmodee. I love that thing, and I think it's a really show of a really vibrant industry.
I think it's definitely, I think the industry is at a stage where it's going to be very interesting where it goes. I'm hoping that we can keep this sort of balance between working professional, where it can be professional enough to be an industry, but still not so corporate as to exclude new ideas, new people, new voices coming in.
Well, and this is where, and I don't want to sound self-regarding here, but this is going to sound the most self-regarding thing I think I've ever said in my life. But I think
you have said a lot of things in your life.
I know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And I still think this is true, though. It's people like us, our job is to keep these people honest. And, people who garner many, many more views and listens, and they get a lot more attention than us. The important thing is that people still keep them honest and say, no, you're going in a direction that's wrong, you're going in a direction that's bland, you're going in a direction that simply is there to squeeze money out of it. And, this is how industries grow. The people who consume the people who commentate and the people who create should live together symbiotically and should influence each other, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm not. Yes, I think to a certain extent, any commentary, I mean, we are basically commentary, is all about sort of shaping a voice within the hobby. Not only of people who think like us, but also people who don't think like us, who might feel, no, they're completely wrong. What they should be focusing on is this and this and that and that and that, and just making sure that there's still a dialogue. There's a vibrant, there's a community there that is willing to engage with games on for lack of a better word, intellectual level, that want to think about these games. They want to sort of figure out how they work, what they do and why, and sort of really, really delve into it and talk about, you know, say things like, I've met a lot of people who think that games of this type are really great and we should have more of them, or games of this type are really complicated, we should do this and this. Just the idea of creating a hobby, of using what we do as a way of just triggering discourse.
And the commentariat of this form of art should aspire to professionalism too. It does in every other form of art. The commentariat should aspire to be valuable and deep and interesting.
Well, it helps to be ambitious. Everything else just hopefully falls into place.
And I'm not sure whether we achieve it, but we certainly aspire to that. Okay, so finally.
Enough navel gazing and, you know, not blowing.
My navel's gorgeous, though. I haven't got one of those freaky, sticky, outy ones, like weirdos. I've got a normal, beautiful, innie navel.
Innie.
That's what they're called, innies and outies.
Yeah, I know. That's you have weird words for things.
Yes, we do. So, I'm going to try and pronounce this name, but it's quite hard to say.
Yes.
Dave Fankhanel. I like that name, Dave Fankhanel. Please excuse me, Dave, if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. But what did Dave Fankhanel say? It's a pleasure to come out of the mouth. The word Fankhanel.
That's just naughty.
It's not a sex thing.
He says, and I shall quote because I can't really think for myself, I'd say yes, and especially as it means, or seems to mean, that the related elements of board gaming are also becoming a bit more professional. Podcasts, reviews, critiques, and general coverage of the board gaming hobby seem to be improving. While there is still a lot of crap out there, I think it's a bit easier to find intelligent, polished, humorous, and informative stuff out there. Sometimes I can even find a resource that is all of that in one. And if you can tell us which one it is, we'll try to copy as much of what they do as we can.
I assume he's talking about ludology, right?
Either that or... well, there's so many good podcasts out there.
Yeah, there is. I like State of Games.
Yeah.
I like Geek All Stars.
Yeah.
It gets a lot of rib, but I still listen to it every week. I like the Dice Tower.
Yeah, I think I've stopped listening to the Dice. So occasionally I listen to the Secret Cabal because it's such
I love the Secret Cabal.
Such a long podcast, and I can do so much. I get a lot of mileage out of just listening to one podcast when I'm just driving around in Berlin, either going to the kindergarten or going to work or going somewhere else, going shopping. Whenever I have to wait for the bus or for the train or anything, I can listen to Secret Cabal and basically carries me through at least a day, or maybe occasionally two.
I would just like to give a little translation note for the listeners who are English speakers. Georgios made a false friend translation from German to English there, because he said driving around the city.
Ah, yes.
Whereas in German, the word fahren, to drive, means to physically drive your car, but also to take all forms of public transport, which it doesn't in English.
I was aware of that, but I was willing to sort of let people believe I actually know how to drive a car.
Yeah, but I wanted, to make me seem a bit more sophisticated because I speak a different language, don't I,
Sophisticated, eh?
I speak all the languages. Ich bin ein Berliner, which, interestingly, translated means I'm a donut.
It actually does not.
Anyway, so I'm going to get off, Georgios.
Ugh.
Because I'm actually quite relieved. I've got another tension and release practice, and I haven't been with them for like 2 weeks now.
All right.
Because of, moving in and all of that. And, they must be really sad.
Yes, I saw them I think they were howling and moaning downstairs.
Because, they haven't contacted me, they haven't sent me an email or called me to say, hey, Ben, where are you?
Yeah.
Why aren't you at the practice? So I assume they must be in the black depths of depression for me not being there.
That is usually what happens when you're not around, yes.
So I'm going to go and join in. I've written another song.
Oh, okay. Can I have a taste?
Well, I mean, you can't taste music, but I can give you the flavour.
Go on.
I don't wanna move that box, 'cause it's full of loads of socks. I don't want to move those tins, 'cause they're full of safety pins. What do you think? It's about moving house, Georgios.
I cannot imagine why they would not call you back immediately after you left the room.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No.
I sit, alone, my partner, gone. The greatest tragedy of solitude is the feeling of obsolescence. And that's why I go to spielpro.com. Whenever I'm alone and I want to fiddle with something and frankly I'm out of zinc, I think spielpro.com. Why do I go there? Well, because you can buy all of those things that you add to games. You can buy standees, you can buy blank dice, you can buy meeples of all the colours of the rainbow, and you can use them for all of those things that a gamer needs. You can use them to prototype your new design. Say you're designing a game about monkeys that are attacking the world, not IP infringing though. Say you're designing a game about taking humans across the stranded sea to islands of plenty and quilts. Well, you can do that with spielpro.com. You can get on there and you can say, I'll have that for my prototype and that for my prototype and a couple of those just for a laugh. And if you go there from us, if you go there from the Perfect Information Podcast and you type in the coupon code INFOPERFECTED, then you'll get a rockin' discount at the checkout. So don't feel solitudinous, don't feel useless, feel happy. Spielpro.com.
I'm Nick Mariner, and this is the Boardgame Professor. Hello everyone, and welcome back. Well, I wasn't thrown directly out of town or tracked down in the Perfect Information Guild and told to go directly to hell after my first and inaugural attempt at this new segment, so I guess I'll keep at it. But before I get into what I had planned, I'd like to address a conversation we had over on the Guild this week. One of our members, Isaac Shalev, asked a question of us, and I don't want to misrepresent and apologize in advance if I do, but it went something like this. Can't games just be fun? They might be works of art, and they might make useful cultural criticism, but can't a designer seek to put out a game with more general intention of making something fun to play, and if the rest of that happens, great. Here's what I'd like to say because it's pertinent to what I have in mind for this new segment on the show. Yes, obviously. Or more directly, yes, both and. Last week, I wrote of the game Lewis and Clark and talked about some of the deeper meanings we can pull about the social and cultural process of U.S. history through the mechanics of the game that are more useful than just knowing some of the names of the people who went on that 1804 expedition. Now, I highly doubt the designer of Lewis and Clark ever read any of the work I cited in the episode, or had ideas like middle ground and cultural broker in his mind at any moment. But I don't want to sell him short either, maybe he did. If anyone knows Cedric, what am I talking about? Of course he's listening to this, everyone does. Have him reach out to me and call me a pedantic dickhole for underestimating his expertise. What I mean is, I'm fairly certain Lewis and Clark the board game was designed specifically with the intention to be a fun, challenging game, and I'll remind you, it succeeds at that goal swimmingly. But all cultural products, especially pop culture products like movies, TV, commercials, board games, all fit into discourses. And other meanings can be made from them, whether the author or producer had any intention of making those connections. Where a game like CO2 or Freedom the Underground Railroad may have wanted to make a point, plenty of games are designed with no overt agenda in mind. Yet that doesn't mean we can't draw meaning from them ourselves as the consumer. So we take a game like Lewis and Clark and despite or maybe just regardless of the intention of the designer, talk about other meanings invoked in its creation. That's what I'm hoping to do with my time here. Still will be talking board games. Most of the time I'll be talking about games I really enjoy and want others to play too. But while we're recommending games, let's also explore ideas. With that general purpose in mind, I'm very excited to talk about another game I love this week called Penny Press from Asmati Games and designers Robert Diekman Dukes and Matt Golick. Penny Press is a game set in the era of yellow journalism at the turn of the 20th century, an era in which characters like William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer battled one another for the most profitable newspaper publications until one of them died calling out for his sled. In the process, they learned the most catchy headline and the most sensational reporting of a story would sell the most papers. To drum up profits, they needed to drum up stories. In gameplay, that theme plays out as an auction game. During a game of Penny Press, there are 5 categories of news that will generate stories, things like politics and human interest. Each of these categories will increase in value at different levels of the bonus track for in-game scoring, making certain types of stories implicitly more valuable to pursue and publish than others throughout the game. Each story drawn is placed on its corresponding track, and there's a tile indicating the current value of that category based on the available stories in it. Now, on a turn, the player will either place some of his 5 reporter meeples on a story, regardless of if it has already been covered by another player, move exactly 1 reporter from one story to another, or recall all reporters from the board back into her personal supply, which is used mostly as a timing strategy when losing out on a story appears inevitable. Each time a previously unassigned story gains a reporter or reporters, the value marker goes up once on the track, making the total value of all stories in that category more valuable by degrees. Alternatively, the player on her turn can go to press. When this happens, she claims every story on the game board where she has at least as many reporters or more than any other player on that story. Those stories are placed on her individual player board, which is a 3x4 grid of squares covering as many of those squares as possible, as they all contain negative point values if left uncovered. That player must first assess which beats are the most valuable according to the current values listed on the main board, and if she has any stories from that beat, those stories must be touching the top row of her board, thematically representing that front page above the fold real estate that matters so much to newspaper coverage, or did when people still read newspapers. Additionally, she takes one story she claimed that isn't part of the top beat, but still touching the top bar of her grid, and declares it an exclusive, making it double value for scoring that round by proclaiming it more special than any other to grab readers. After that, she scores accordingly, clears her board, follows a few processes to reset her board and refill stories, changing values and end bonuses of the 5 categories as needed, and play continues. After a player has gone to press 3 or 4 times, depending on player count, everyone else gets one more chance to do so, and scoring happens. The player who scored the most during the game, representing the notoriety of their paper, is the winner. And that's it. So first let me explain what I love about Penny Press as a board game. I tend not to love strict auction games without some other driving component to make that play more engaging. So for instance, the auction portion of Power Grid is tolerable because it's part of a much broader network building resource management game. Penny Press uses an auction mechanic that blends with worker placement, very similar to what you would see in a game like Keyflower, wherein your worker meeples are the auction resources. The basic arc of the game is the process of players competing to sensationalize particular kinds of stories in order to cash in on their investment of sending reporters to cover those beats. But the game also dictates the direction of which beats to focus on by slowly increasing the in-game bonus for certain kinds of stories. Thematically speaking, the market dictates that consumers want human interest stories. If that category promises 10 points to the player who owns the most valuable stories of that category at the end of the game, players might send reporters there to stir up interest in a thing that people already were interested in anyway. It's a self-flagellating machine of consumers consuming what they're told to consume, and producers producing what they think they're being told to produce, even though they were the ones who made the consumers want them to produce it. Did that make sense to you? Me neither. But I read that sentence 6 times, and all the words are exactly where they need to be, I promise. It's a terrific game, with tough, crucial timing decisions, and a lot of jockeying for position in a pretty tight contest. I like it very much. Now, what exactly do we do with it? How could we possibly take a game about news engineering and make it meaningful for this world? I'm being facetious, of course. I've been thinking of this game, among other things, quite a lot since the Brexit vote and the presidential election here in the States. In particular because we now have this super fun and super validating term tumbling around in our lexicon, which is fake news. We are beyond even concerns of teasing out the ideological underpinnings of a media outlet that claims to be fair and balanced. Instead, we are now tasked with trying to figure out what news is actually real and what news is not, in fact, real at all. A study of activity on Facebook, one of the true heroes in this process, we can all agree, published an assessment that 80% of readers were likely to share a story based purely on the headline that confirmed their worldview without ever actually opening the story to read it and verify its contents. Penny Press isn't set in the modern news realm, but the parallels to its own subject matter and ours aren't hard to connect. Hearst and Pulitzer, in their newspapers The Journal and The World, respectively, assessed the growing tension of Spanish presence in the Caribbean and the Cuban battle for independence from them, and flourished in the profitability of stories about the unfolding drama. When the Maine exploded in a Cuban harbor, it didn't take long for those two publications to fan the flames that would eventually become war between Spain and a growing U.S. military power. In other words, the news promoted a war and then made money by selling papers on the war, all under the guise of benignly reporting out on what consumers wanted most, news about important stuff or whatever. Let's connect this fun little game of ours to the work of Max Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno, two German scholars from the Frankfurt School writing about mid-20th century. In their influential writing on what they called the culture industry, they define culture itself as one of the many products bought and sold through capitalism, produced through industrial efficiency just as coal or oil or the military apparatus. When looking at the culture industry, they explicitly linked the products available to consumers and the set of options available to them to interpret and understand those products as all part of a carefully coordinated industry of identity production meant to feign a facade of difference and option by creating just the smallest variables in choice. So for instance, a man becomes an architect, buys a Dodge Stratus, purchases a modest ranch-style home in Montana, and only drinks Macallan 12 Scotch, believing all of these personal choices to reflect taste and self-determination, without ever understanding the full force of culture, media, and advertising set before him a basic program to keep production plugging along uninterrupted. Job, car, house, booze. The details within that program mean nothing, but the industry of culture convinces him they mean everything. News media fits within the range of this critique, especially as it turned toward mass profit as it did in the days of Hearst and Pulitzer. News is a product to be sold. We have a variety of options on what media we choose to consume, believing Fox News or MSNBC or HuffPost or Breitbart or BBC all define our sensibilities, and in a lot of ways they do. Obviously, if you read Breitbart every day, you are getting a markedly different narrative of the world than if you read Mother Jones. But each of these outlets remains within the same industrial platform of offering information you know you want in such a way as to keep you consuming it. The difference in personal taste and ideology in that arrangement is entirely irrelevant. Ratings and readership matter. Getting you to watch the commercials in between segments is required, which is why an anchor will beg a question of you first and promise an answer you can never live without right after the break. Each of these news media represent precisely the process at play in Penny Press the board game. So much so, it's a little intimidating to think of while playing it without feeling like you need a shower after. Horkheimer and Adorno write this: "The ruthless unity in the culture industry is evidence of what will happen in politics. Market differentiations such as those of A and B films or of stories and magazines in different price ranges depend not so much on subject matter as on classifying, organizing, and labeling consumers. This classification and quantification of consumers is the game in Penny Press. The very function of play in that game is to assess the profit value of a particular story based on consumer demand, to hike up the fervor for stories of that exact nature, then to sell that story to consumers based on what they believe is their demand, but is in reality more profitable because the media industry itself has heightened the lust for that story to its boiling point." What we learned from the yellow journals in the 1890s, and what we're learning again now, is that when that model of journalism thrives, when profit drives the industry over truth, then readers purchase and consume the story they think they want, not the story that might be, true. Again, the designers of Penny Press might not have had any intention to make these connections, to comment on the state of modern media and its deleterious effects on teasing fact from fiction. They probably had a set of unique mechanics and fit them skillfully into a fun game. You can play Penny Press and not think of any of these things, and still, I think, have a wonderful time at the table. It really is a quality game. But should you feel like making the connections I've put out here, I encourage you to seek out Horkheimer and Adorno and anyone else in the Frankfurt School, and use this elegant design to think more deeply about news as a product. And ask yourself not just whether the news is feeding you a story to be believed, but what product are they trying to sell you? I think I have a pretty good answer to that question, actually, and I'll give it to you right after the break. I'm Nick Mariner on Twitter at The Good Mariner, and my board game blog is iCallYellow at iCallYellow.com. Thanks for listening.
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative.
It's this week's review. So I'm like, Dad, we're totally like responsible and like we totally know this stuff. Gosh. And he's like, I am Zeus. I'm the granddaddy of all gods. I will banish you for your insolence. And now we're like stuck here and it's like so dull. Like super dull. And my sister's like, let's do a planet. Like we'll show him we're like grown up and stuff. And everyone's like, yeah. But we like can't like actually, you know, like talk to each other and stuff. We just like throw aspects of a planet and elements into the cosmos and stuff. And if they like fit and stuff, they're like totally created and like bam, you know. Like you want an atmosphere? Well, we'll take this fire and like this water and like if you have like an atmosphere, you can like totally like throw it another aspect, like a building on top of it, like a layer by layer, like flowers and mountains and like birds, and then bam, the planet. It's like totes easy. But you know, like we can't really talk with one another because the cosmos doesn't do sound. It's like totally unfair, but you know, it's like the rules. But we can like do telepathy kind of stuff sometimes. Like if I think really, really, really hard about an element and stuff, like my brother can see like a card-shaped thing like appear before him. Like he can like see it and stuff, and bam, he can figure out what I'm thinking. Or I can like swap stuff. It's like so cool. And then my dad will be like, all right, maybe you're cool after all. And I'm like super lame because I didn't like totally see you were right all along. Like, and we can like totally go visit humans and mess with their heads, like, you know, or whatever, you know, it's cool. We can just play a card game, like, you know, Creo or something. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, skip to the end.
It's the one-sentence review.
Divinely wrought and ineffably devised, Creo starts shrouded in primordial mists, but clarifies to reveal the fields of Elysium.
A slightly more polished, less gimmicky take on Hanabi, Creo excels in providing a cooperative experience that is equal parts deduction, trust, and bold gamble.
Georgios? Ooh, what's that in the corner of the room?
I don't know, but it's eating peanuts with its nose.
So, Georgios.
Yes.
Here we are, sat in this beautiful Greek temple.
Yes, that's the south floor of Perfect Information Towers for listeners who do not know that.
There are men carved out of marble whose forms are quite muscular. There are ladies who are quite shapely. There's Aphrodite there. There's Hera. There's Heracles. Notice I said it in the Greek manner.
I'm deeply impressed, almost as much as I care about your pronunciation.
And it's amazing that they've managed to actually sneak an elephant into this particular room.
Yes, they do.
What with the hoplons that we have stood at the doors, Georgios.
Pretty much.
So I think the elephant in this room is the sort of the main thrust of this game, the sort of USP, the thing that makes it Hanabi, and that's not having cards turned around the opposite way, but it's the strong limitation on communication in this game.
Exactly.
Right? And my question is, do games in which communication is limited work, or is the limitation on communication too constricting for players?
Yes and no. Yes, they work. Yes, they can be limiting to players, but then again, most rules are basically about limiting what you want to do, putting obstacles in your path, and you trying to figure out how to best maneuver those obstacles. In Creo, it is basically how to coordinate which cards to play, even though we can barely talk to one another. We can barely give each other information. We need to infer information, either if you're being really playing close to the rules, only by way of which cards we play, which cards we know are still in the game, which aren't, which should be played, which can be played. If you're bending the rules, like I usually do with Hanabi, when I'm playing with new players, by all the other ways in which you can communicate without actually speaking something, like posture, grimaces, like just going, what have you, just commenting on what you're going to do. These are all ways in which you can sort of slightly sidestep how you play the game. The challenge is basically in trying to get what you want to do, like playing the right cards without telling everyone what to do.
I mean, yeah, for me, the joy in these limited communication games is those ways of trying to circumvent the rules, right? Because I think I played Hanabi with someone who was very strong on what was acceptable and what was not acceptable, and they were not backward in coming forward when they asserted what they thought those rules were. And it turned into a joyless slog, because literally everything we did was accompanied by, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't pull that expression. That's da-da-da-da. And that's the joy of these limited communication games, is that you raise an eyebrow, you grimace, you move an elbow. Is it cheating a bit? Yes, to some degree, but this is what the game is inviting you to do. And if a game is an experience generator, the particular experience that these limited communication games are asking you to generate is mischievous, right?
Yes, to some extent I agree. I think it's quite fascinating that these games specifically are very much about this fuzzy line you draw between how close you stick to the rules and how far you bend them. And I think I've started out, the first time I played Hanabi, actually, I had a phase where I was fairly strict about the rules in Hanabi as well, but I quickly gave up because I too realized that it just sucks the fun out of it.
Yeah.
I think, the way you move within this spectrum of how far you bend the rules has a lot to do with how much of a challenge you really want to put yourself through. If you want the highest possible challenge in either Hanabi or Creo, you literally don't communicate in any way, shape or form at all.
Apart from what is explicitly said in the rules, and there's no deviation from that.
It's perfectly fine, but it's just as fine to go in the other direction. Interestingly enough, you can occasionally go too far into that direction, right, completely undermining the challenge of the game. Like, I've had friends of mine who might still be listening to this podcast told me about playing Hanabi and thinking it's terribly simple because, yes, you don't say the things you wanted to do, the other player to play, but you can give them all kinds of hints. And it's true. If you give them enough hints, they will not pull the card they're not supposed to pull. But that undermines the purpose of the game. It's no fun in beating the challenge by really, really bending the rules so far that they almost break them.
And I think the fun is circumnavigating the rules in such a way that finds that balance.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the enjoyable part of these kind of games. And because I'm not a fan of constriction of communication. Mm-hmm. I think people should be able to blurt out whatever they want, whenever they want. And it should be incumbent on the person who's then receiving that to bring them up on it if that's necessary. But these games are predicated on that. That is their central USP.
Yeah.
And it does promote mischievousness and a feeling of, am I transgressing what this should be? And that's fun. Because basically being a child, it takes you back to childhood, because childhood is all about transgressing what seems to you to be completely arbitrary rules, right?
Okay.
And that's fun.
Okay.
And these games promote that. And I think that's good as long as you don't tip the scales towards it just being a promenade, right?
Right. No. I think that's interesting. It's the first time I've heard this sort of stance articulated. And yeah, I can totally see that. I think I'm coming from the other direction in that I really quite enjoy the challenge these games provide, but I'm willing to sort of soften that challenge to make sure it's still enjoyable, like enjoyably frustrating when we fail and not just feeling arbitrary and unfair because, we didn't have any option to do anything at all because, there's nothing. I don't know anything. I don't know what to do. The game doesn't give me any clues and you're not giving me any clues either. So, I like these kind of games, and I'm usually not much of a challenge fan, but I like these type of games to be challenging but just challenging enough, not too challenging. And I think the interesting thing, as we said in a one-sentence review, we quite like the game, and we're coming from two different perspectives on this type of game. And the fact that Creo sort of manages to satisfy both our desires to have a fun time speaks to its quality.
And I think my one-sentence review actually said, Ben, you're the most pretentious dickhead in history.
Yes, but that was just, the subtitle.
So, what did you think of my interactive, candid photo montage?
Well, it was certainly an experience.
All right, so I feel, Georgios, certainly my experience, and I think to some degree your experience, needs to be tempered and also separated into separate things. Because the first experience I had of this game was not massively enjoyable. Mm-hmm. And not because I think it was the fault of the game, it was the refusal of half of the participants to engage in the game.
Okay.
They said, we don't like co-ops.
Yes.
Therefore, we will not engage with this game at all. And not just not engage, but actively undermine any experience that is trying to be achieved, because from the outset, this is not the kind of thing we like.
Well, yeah, I think it's a bit harsh, but I do agree with you that a game like this does need a certain amount of investment by every participant. Yeah.
Well, and then the second experience was much better because we had people who wanted to play it, right?
Yeah.
And the reason you need buy-in, especially with this game, is because although my review tried to cram in as many sort of ancient Greek cliches as I could, what I'm trying to say is this game starts utterly obscured by fog, with seemingly no game there. So essentially what you're trying to do is play cards out on the table to go through sort of a tech tree of creating a world.
Yeah.
First you create the atmosphere, then you create the plants, then you create the animals, and then you create
the planet, yeah.
The planet. And you can't do anything. All you can do is sort of play a card or show a card, and it's at the beginning, you think there is no way to solve this. This is unsolvable. There's no game there. It's incredibly lazy. But what happens is the fogs evaporate and you actually see the decisions people make suggest certain things. And so the first player, it's very incumbent on the first player to make the correct decision. Because if they play the correct, if they make the correct decision, then you can say, well, that's absolutely that. It can't be that unless they're a complete moron, and you have to hope that the people you're playing with aren't complete morons. And so I found the experience of this game initially intensely frustrating and inexplicable.
Yeah.
And this is why I think I enjoy it so much, is because actually what the game does is lead you in and then say, no, there are paths. It is solvable. You just need to rely on the actions of others, which is really good fun.
Yeah, no, I think the central part of the game is the deduction element. It's you have a certain set of information right from the start. All cards are dealt out. You know which cards you have. You know which cards need to be played and in roughly which order. Part of it is relying on the fact that everybody else will do the mental work necessary to figure out, right, this is what we need to do this turn, this is what we need to do next turn, and these are my options. And a lot of it is sort of calculating, like who's going to be first player this turn, who's going to be first player next turn, how is it going to change, which cards do I have to play, which cards should I play, and so on and so forth. And I think that the most interesting element of this game is that the deduction, and like many other deduction games, isn't about so much a logic puzzle, as in, I have excluded this possibility and this possibility, therefore possibility C must be the answer.
Yeah.
It is much more about, right, we have various moving parts here, moving players who are sort of making decisions, but they're also limited by what they have in their hands. So, depending on who does what and when, I can sort of deduce what I should be doing. So, and there's this great moment of excitement and, achievement when you manage to play a perfect turn.
Right.
When the first player puts down the right card, the next player reveals the right card and goes on and on and on. It all fits together beautifully. And all of a sudden you've completed 2 steps of the process. And it just feels so fantastic if these things just work.
When the mist evaporates and you go, yes, that's what it is. And there's that wonderful thing where sometimes you get into a decision where your hands are tied, you're going to lose, which is intensely frustrating, but I think games of this character need it. Co-op games need this.
Yeah.
They need moments of despair so you can enjoy the joy much more, right? But there are certain moments where you get to that point, you go, I have these 2 choices to make. Either of them works.
Yeah.
There's no way for me to go wrong here. And that's great, especially if you juxtapose it with I have 2 choices here. Neither of them work. When you have those moments, and these kind of co-ops need those moments, and they both exist in this game, which is really good.
And I also had this similar experience where out of nowhere, because of a sort of 2 so-called wrong plays sort of cancel each other out. That was a great time there where I can't really put it together again, but I do remember one player playing a card that they realized, I shouldn't have played that. And this then being followed by another card that they also realized, I shouldn't have played that. But because of the way the game is structured, both of these cards worked and play well and were to our benefit. Just this great surprising moment where even though you have all this information in your hand, you know what you are doing, you kind of assume you know what the others are going to do, and then you're surprised and it still somehow occasionally works. This is just great. This is just this kind of unpredictable resolution of a turn that just keeps a game exciting and tense and just a fun thing to explore.
Alright, so how about this? You take a tenuous grasp of reality, a lot of condescension, at least 4 cups, and a slow-wittedness masked through pretensions of prolixity.
Well, that's you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's design.
So, all of this so far has been quite nebulous. We haven't actually really talked about the game particularly.
Yes.
And we've talked about limited communication, and we haven't discussed how that's expressed here.
Yeah.
And I think this is the core of the game. So basically, you have these cards in your hand and you have to lay them out in a certain order, very sort of Hanabi style, except you're not showing the rest of the people, you know what you have. And you have these tokens in the center of the table. And you can choose to take these tokens at the beginning of the game. You distribute them between you, and they have different actions. So one token allows you to show a card to another player. If you pay 2 tokens, it allows you to give a card to another player or take a card.
No, both. You swap them.
You swap 2 cards. And 3 tokens,
you can take a card out of the discard pile.
And so this is where your communication is essentially. And what this does, and I think the most utilized action is the cheapest one. Because you're saying to someone, this is the card I'm going to play next turn. You have to then adjust your actions based upon that. And what's so clever is you lay your cards down, then you decide to communicate. And so you can see by someone changing their mind after you've offered them some information, either it means, okay, they're playing this, so I play this, or they're saying, okay, then we'll change the strategy. And that really is really, really clever design.
Oh, no, I agree. I think one of the interesting subtleties about the communication is the fact that, yes, in 90% of cases, the card you're going to show is the one you're going to play.
Right.
But in some rare cases, the card you're going to show is just there so somebody else knows that you have that card.
Right.
It might not be this turn you're going to use it. Maybe you're working on, you're hoping to play next turn. It's rare, but occasionally you have these moments. And I think, again, it feels very, very good to sort of find a new little wrinkle on how to use the communication to coordinate and align your strategies and your card play. And that's just really clever. I think what I enjoy most is actually the second part, which I think the second step when you pay 2 tokens is, I think, one of the most powerful and also one of the most tense actions you can take, because you can't really look at what the other player's given you.
Right.
You're doing it blind. So basically somebody else usually wants to give you a card or hopes that you will give him the card that they really need, but you have no way of communicating what that person needs. You need to pay attention to what they've been playing, what they explicitly haven't been playing, these kind of, and all this thinking about what happens, what did you do, what didn't you do, when did you play what? That's just this wealth of information for you to use None of it is explicit. None of it says, because this happened, therefore this must happen. It's all about, all right, if you have this card and you have that card and we need to play these two cards, which cards should I play? And I love this kind of puzzle it puts you in, because in some cases it's easily solvable. In some cases you go, all right, I only have this one green card I can play. We need a green card in this turn. There's nothing else I can do. So my hands are tied, but I can, because I'm going to play green and I've showed green, blah, blah, blah. You can sort of have this chain of logical reasons.
You can fix your limitations. That's
exactly
the hope, that you can fix your limitations by parceling out the information when it's necessary. Simply by the act of doing an action can sometimes suggest, it doesn't matter what you show sometimes. You just say, I'm doing this, because then it suggests that I have this or I don't have this.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the simple act of offering information is sometimes very revealing, and that's really interesting.
But exactly, and the next step ahead, and this is the part that I really cherish, but I understand some people do not, is sometimes you need to go out on a limb. Sometimes you don't have perfect information. And you need to go, all right, I have to go with my gut. Should I play the red card or should I play the blue card? There's no way of knowing what the next player in line is going to play. And these beautifully tense moments, these beautiful moments of, just taking a risk and not knowing how it pans out and just, going out there, being like, making a bold choice and just hoping for the best. This is something I really, really cherish in board games, in any board game, cooperative or not. This is what's the most exciting to me. Moments where you need to take a risk and just, throw yourself out there. And if it works, everyone's happy. And if it doesn't, well, you tried your best. And I really like that.
And this is something this game really encourages.
Pretty much, yeah.
Playing this made me want to play. So, Georgios, what did this game make you want to play?
It did not actually make me want to play the game that we've been also talking about during this review. But
Normie.
It did make me want to play a different take on that very game. Namely, a somewhat overlooked, fun, non-cooperative take on Hanabi, which is Abracadabra. I think that was the name I first played it as. It's been released in the States as Abracadabra for some reason, as an extra syllable in there. And
bigger is better, Georgios. Don't
Clearly.
you know that?
Clearly. It has a, I think, terrible German translation, which I'm not going to mention here because I think it's really terrible. But yes, it's a Hanabi style game as well. You see what everybody else has. You don't see what you have. And you're spellcasters, magicians, and you're trying to figure out trying to basically cast spells. You can cast as many as you want until you want to stop. There's a certain limit on the certain rules in which direction, in which order you may cast spells, and they all have different effects. And you're trying to either kick somebody out of the game for this turn, which ends the turn, gives you victory points, or to speak all the spells you have in front of you. I think you have 5 spells in front of you. You don't know which value they have, and then if you manage in your own turn on your turn to remove all those spells, like cast all of them, you win the turn and you get victory points. I think it takes a slightly bit too long to be really fun, but apart from that, it's great. It's like Hanabi, only competitive. You're looking at what everybody else has. You're deducing. You're trying to figure out. You're trying to pay attention. Who avoided certain spells? Does that mean I have that spell? Some of them are not in the game. They might come in later. There's a nice element of figuring out probabilities, and it's just colorful and fun, and I don't think they really go well together in the same game night, but the idea of getting into other people's heads, using a lot of deduction to plan your move, sort of reminded me of Creo. And that game, Abracadabra, very strange, is worth picking up, worth chasing down, because I'm fairly certain it'll be pretty cheap by now.
Yeah, the game this made me want to play is based purely on no rational thing. It's small box cooperative games from Sweet Games. There's something about that box size. When we were playing Creo, I looked at the box and it just brought back loads of happy memories, and it made me want to play the Grizzled again. That comes in the same
happiness.
box. But the Grizzled is, Creo is not as good as the Grizzled. That's absolutely a fact. But
you don't love it as much as the Grizzled, that I can see.
But yeah, they've brought out 2 small box cooperative games, And they're both fantastic in every aspect. They look beautiful. They play wonderfully. They're short, but really deep. And I don't know what Sweet November's plans are, but the first 2 games that they brought out have both been stellar, really, really great. And I'll be really anticipating what they come up with next. And today I'm having a game day after we record this, and I'm going to play the Grizzled, and I'm going to love it, and I'm going to wallow in the trenches of the First World War. So, Georgios.
Yes.
Should people buy this game?
Yes.
Expand.
No.
You're an expositor. Say something clever.
Right. Buy it. It's good. It's small. It's great. And if you like co-op games, it should be in your collection. And if you... No, that's basically it. If you like co-op games, it's something that you shouldn't... It might get overlooked because I'm not sure if it gets a big push. Also, it's been renamed apparently in the US.
To Creus, apparently.
Creus for some reason. But it's great. It's a small box. It's a small price tag. It's a great game. Easy to carry around with. And it just works. It's fun. You can't go wrong with this game.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's cheap. And also, it might seem, for me, it was a little inexplicable at first, but once it revealed itself, it was so satisfying. This is a game of real quality. It's got real love in it. And I think Sweet games, are they Sweet November? Or are they? I think they're just Sweet games now, aren't they?
I don't know.
But Sweet games are really people to look out for, and I'm very excited with everything they do. So go out, spend your money.
There is a reason why I put it on my top 3 games of 2016. And one of them is, go buy it. It's good.
Buy it. We got through it again, Georgios.
Somehow, miraculously.
And I'm confident I'll get through January again.
Well, that shouldn't be that hard because January is almost over.
Well, it's a hell of a bloody achievement because January's a nightmare, isn't it?
It was a bit cold. Got better.
It's just dull and grey and boring, and you come down off the loveliness of Christmas and then just thrust into January and say, go back to your normal life and enjoy it.
See, the problem, February is far worse. I'm sorry to tell you. But, see, you're right, January's the come down, and then you come February and you realise it's still not over. But it's only when March comes around that you feel like, all right, life is coming back to me.
But then you got Valentine's Day in February, Georgios, which means you get to have some sexy sex time.
Yes. Yeah, sexy sex times. Which is what you do on Valentine's Day, as every couple knows. Well,
at least you should have sex once a year on Valentine's Day, Georgios.
Yes, you can have more than once a year, but it's I firmly believe it's tradition in a lot of relationships that Valentine's Day is the day where you get into a fight.
Anyway, how should people contact us if they've had a fight and need a shoulder to cry on, Georgios?
They can, it's difficult. We have a lot of options and they might overwhelm them. Let's start at the top. We have a website at infoperfected.com. We have Twitteries. We have 2 Twitter handles, InfoPerfected and Perfected Info. If you need to find out what the difference between those two are, maybe look at the IDs. Anyway, then we have emails. infoperfected@gmail.com. We have Guild on Board Game Geek. We might have mentioned that before. It's starting to thrive. People actually talking to one another and not just at us, which is great.
Yeah, so we wanted to say this. The Guild ain't just for the Guild question every week, but it's also for you just to come on, chat about things,
Give us ideas.
Have an highbrow conversazione. Because you're certainly not getting an highbrow podocasto.
Yes, definitely not in any language resembling whatever it was that you just spoke.
And I'd just like to say, one of our users,
yes,
a Swedish gentleman whose name I forget, sorry, but he's done this geek list.
Oh yeah,
based upon the collections of members of the guild, and then ranked them in order of ratings.
Yes,
and number 1 is a game neither of us have played.
Yes, because we're both squeamish about it. I am at least.
Yeah, so go on the guild. You'll find that geek list is incredibly interesting.
And actually, I might actually get to play a game on the list that I haven't played yet next week.
What's that?
Keyflower.
Oh yeah, I want to play Keyflower. It's very exciting.
Yeah. That was the Board Game Geek group. The Guild of Perfect Information, number 2348. Then we have Instagram, where we take pictures, occasionally with filters, and almost comment on them, which is Perfect Information. On Instagram, I think we've stopped taking pictures of ourselves, and I've I believe I've deleted all the pictures of our junks we've taken accidentally. Most
All of them?
Well, most of them at least. Anyway, so Instagram, we're there. And what else have I missed?
I think that's everything, isn't it?
Possibly not, no.
But if we've forgotten something, forgive us. We're always drunk. And yeah, come onto the website, and if you really like the show and you want to support us, we have a support button. We're planning to sort of go big and do a sort of fundraiser in the year, but that's not coming yet. If you really feel the need to spend your money on our show, which would really help us.
Maybe before it loses all value.
Absolutely. It would get us to conventions. It would help us improve the equipment. It will make our entry into the world of video easier. So come on, there's a support button.
This is actually not a threat. It might sound like a threat, though. Is it a threat?
No, they'd love to see our beautiful faces on the videos, Georgios.
Well, we're filming our faces?
Not our feces, no, our faces.
But why? I mean, the whole point of doing a podcast
that's what
is
we talk through, Georgios.
Well, can't we just like shoot everything below shoulder or something?
That would be really weird.
Yes, very arty.
Chest reviews.
Chest reviews in black and white.
I give it 2 nipples out of 9.
How is that possible? How is it possible that nobody actually came up with this idea before us? We should totally do
Anyway,
that.
it would help us do the nipple reviews.
Exactly.
And yeah, we really want to go further, and your money would really help us. But if you can't give us money, that's fine. We understand. I mean, you've got things to spend it on, like anthrax and drugs. So go on iTunes.
Classes.
Go on iTunes, give us a review.
That's great, yeah. iTunes is a great way to support us. Tell your friends, tell iTunes, all the friends you have on iTunes, tell iTunes. iTunes may be your friend.
And, talk about us to your friends, recommend us to your friends. If you have a show or you have a forum, recommend us on those things. Anything, we really want to get people listening because we think the show is great, we think you're great, and we want you as a community of great people to grow.
Yes. Basically, what we're hoping to do is hopefully getting more people involved in not only listening to the show, but actually engaging in games, hopefully in a way that maybe, I'm going to be very pretentious here.
Be pretentious, George.
Full of myself. I'm kind of hoping that us talking bollocks for close to 2 hours every couple of weeks might inspire others to want to talk bollocks as well. Not just on podcasts, just, to delve into games, to think about games, to re-engage with games, to enjoy games more, to seek out interesting ideas, to just, dive into the hobby and get even more out of it than they already do. And the best way to do that is hopefully by us telling them, hey, it's fine to take games seriously. It's fine to talk about them seriously, and it's fine to make knob jokes. So if you think that somebody out there in your social circles and beyond might be susceptible to this idea, give them a shout out. Tell them, there's this podcast where these two blokes talk crap, and occasionally they say something that's almost insightful. You might find it funny and or helpful in buying games.
And finally, if you'd like us to review your game, if you think what we say about it might be helpful to you and valuable, contact us on infoperfected@gmail.com. Anyway, I'm going off to have a shower, Georgios, because I've heard that helps you in the realm of lust.
No, well, not if you're alone, no.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No, I'm just going to make sure that you don't lock it.